立法會主席。
The President of the Council.
必須向中請議員翻嚟。質詢。
Questions. Question 1, the Honourable CHAN Chi-chuen. President, Any person who displays roadside publicity materials without the written permission of the authority granted under the Public Health and Municipal Services Ordinance commits an offence. Moreover, the management scheme for the display of roadside non-commercial publicity materials implementation guidelines provide that the display of publicity materials at central dividers of roads, pedestrian crossings, and within 30 meters of traffic upstream side of road junctions is prohibited. Nevertheless, quite a number of members of the public have complained to me that a large number of banners were hung by organizations professing love for the motherland and Hong Kong on the streets in Yau Chi Mong district in recent months, and some of them were even hung in the no-banner zones. These members of the public have lodged complaints with the Food and Environmental Hygiene Department, but FEHD has neither instituted prosecution against the persons concerned nor removed such banners. In this connection, will the government inform this council: A, apart from the banners removed for the general elections of the Legislative Council and District Councils, of the number of unauthorized banners displayed on the streets which were removed by the authorities in the past 3 years, and the total amounts of fines imposed on the persons concerned. B, whether in the last half year the authorities had received and approved applications for hanging the aforesaid banners. If so, of the details. If approval had not been given, the reasons for the authorities not removing the banners and instituting prosecutions, and C, whether measures are in place at present to prevent the situation of a large number of unauthorized banners being displayed on the streets or such a situation from worsening. Secretary for Food and Health. President, the Lands Department has implemented the management scheme for the display of roadside non-commercial publicity materials or management scheme since May 2003 to manage the display of non-commercial publicity materials on the roadside, and made revisions to the implementation guidelines of the management scheme in August 2011. The non-commercial publicity materials in question are usually displayed by non-profit making organizations, district councils and their committees, as well as members of the Legislative Council and district councils, etc., for the purpose of promoting or publicizing activities that are non-commercial or of interest to the public, and disseminating information that is of general interest or use to the public. For the purpose of implementing the management scheme, some officers in LANSD are authorized to give permission for the display of roadside non-commercial publicity materials under Section 104A 1B of the Public Health and Municipal Services Ordinance, Cap 132, exercising authority delegated from the Director of Food and Environmental Hygiene. For the display of publicity materials that is verified by LANSD as being unauthorized or non-compliant with the implementation guidelines, the FEHD will remove them and recover the removal costs from the parties concerned under Section 104C1 of the above ordinance. FEHD conducts joint operations with the LANSD regularly to remove publicity materials, the display of which is unauthorized or non-compliant with the implementation guidelines. For cases involving unauthorized display of non-commercial publicity materials, the government will, apart from recovering the removal costs from the persons concerned, decide whether to prosecute the persons who are the owners of or will benefit from such publicity materials, having regard to the circumstances of each case and the relevant law. My reply to the question is as follows. A, the following number of non-commercial publicity materials were removed in the past 3 years, excluding those pertaining to the general elections of the LegCo and district councils. The numbers are: in 2010, 6,355, 5,768 in 2011, and 2,189 in 2012 from January to November. The removal costs recovered from the persons concerned amounted to $275,044 in 2010, $384,527 in 2011, and $232,158 in 2012 from January to November. Parts B and C. As regards the complaints about a large number of suspected unauthorized banners which appeared on the streets in Yau Chi Mong district in recent months, FHD's investigations revealed that This stemmed from the putting up of banners by two organizations to express their views in public areas. Records of the respective district lands officers of Lands D showed that these banners were displayed without the requisite permission of the lands officers. FHD has reminded the persons in charge at the scene to take note of the relevant provisions laid down in the management scheme and the legislation. As regards cases where the manner in which the organizations displaying the banners might pose safety concerns to pedestrians and motorists using road concern, FHD has referred them to the police for follow-up action. FHD and the relevant departments will continue to keep in view the situation and follow up as appropriate. When necessary, we would take prosecution action. Thank you. Mr. CHAN Chi-chuen, President, the administration has not taken this matter seriously and has not resolved the matter. Let me declare this matter is not confined just to Yau Chi Mong or busy areas of town. Well, even in Tai Po, my position to display banners as LegCo members have been taken up by these banners as well. According to the figures, well, as we all know, the situation is getting serious, and they are everywhere a nuisance and have become an eyesore in Hong Kong. But the number of removal has dropped from 6,000 odd in 2010 to 2,000 odd last year. I'd like to ask the administration whether it is because of shortage of manpower or ineffective enforcement. Do we have to follow up with the ombudsman? Furthermore, yes, you can only ask one follow-up question. So can I withdraw the first question? Right. My supplementary question is, as the Secretary said, these banners were unauthorized. Why hasn't enforcement been taken? During elections, you know, it was very swift. Even we were there to watch the banners, they were removed at once. And according to reply, FHD reminded the persons in charge there was no enforcement. Has there been double standard or multi-standard on the part of the administration? Secretary. Well, in September 2011, the LANSD started the implementation guidelines, and then the administration also tightened its enforcement on unauthorized banners. According to FHD, since the implementation of the management scheme, the situation has improved. And then in between January and February and June, between June and September last year, there were CE and LC elections, respectively. So during the two elections, there was a corresponding drop in the number of banners removed. But if we include all the election-related non-commercial publicity materials, well, the number was between 4,000 and 7,000 last year. It was not a big difference from previous years. Mr. Steven HO. Well, this problem has bothered us for many years, and this is a serious problem. And members query whether the administration has double standard, and so we hope that the government can deal with all unauthorized publicity materials in equal manner. So for banners with political slogans, is the administration adopted a laissez-faire approach and has been rather lenient? How will the administration improve the situation? Secretary. For all commercial publicity materials, once they are discovered, they will be removed by FHD staff at once. If a person is caught posting them, he will be prosecuted. In between January to November 2012, FHD has removed over 9 million publicity materials and had over 3,000 prosecutions. So our enforcement has always been fair and impartial. We do not bias towards particular parties. Mr. Wong Yuk-man, well, Secretary, you are new. You only read out the answer prepared by AOs. You are not aware of the real situation. For all candidates of the LC, well, after the elections, we kept receiving fines, summonses from the FHD. They've been very swift to act. In the last term, I was fined over $10,000. At this term, a few $1,000s. So you are kept at the dark. You know nothing about it. And may I refer to paras 2 and 3 of the main reply. The more I look at it, the more angry I get. I give the Secretary the benefit of the doubt. I won't blame him. I think he's just repeating answers given to him by FHD, and you're doomed. FHD has reminded the persons in charge at the scene to take note of the relevant provisions laid down in the management scheme and the legislation. Who are the persons in charge? There are so many such anti-Falun Gong publicity banners in Yau Chi Mong, and they are all unauthorized. And the punctuation and the grammar is also wrong. As regards cases where the manner in which the organizations displaying the banners might pose safety concerns, blah, blah, blah. Now, if it poses public safety concerns, FHD has referred them. What do you mean by that? So I'm asking the Secretary whether all these banners will be removed at once and impose fines. I want the Secretary to remove the banners at once. Please take your seat first. Secretary, if it is proved that the banners were hung at unauthorized areas or improper areas, they will be removed at once by FHD staff. But if there were persons in charge, of course, they would be reminded that, well, a reminder will be given first. And then depending on the situation, FHD will take enforcement action. Mr. Chen Kam-lam, President, in recent years, publicity banners, commercial or non-commercial alike, proliferating on our streets, in our tourism areas in particular. The situation is worsening. The question, once the administration, Mr. Wong Yuk-man, please do not speak loudly in the chamber. Mr. Chen Kam-lam, please go on. President, I think the main purpose of the question is to ask the administration to step up enforcement action and to remove unauthorized, unapproved publicity banners on our streets. So I'd like to ask whether the administration will arrange for members of the department to carry out removal operations in all our streets and tourism areas to cover all commercial and non-commercial publicity materials. Secretary, since this is such a specific proposal, I have to assess the situation first to see whether indeed we have a shortage of manpower before we consider enhancing manpower. Mr. Wong Ting-kwong. Thank you. In reply to the question, the Secretary referred to political and non-political slogans. I'd like to know what is the definition. Mr. Wong Yuk-man talked about anti-Falun Gong material. So how do you define Falun Gong? Is it political or not? All right, there are persons in charge. If there were no one in charge, now if the materials are placed there around the clock, and should somebody be there to look after the publicity materials around the clock? If no one is present, then the materials can be removed. Secretary, I have no intention to make a distinction between political and non-political materials. I was referring to commercial and non-commercial publicity materials. For non-commercial publicity materials, they might be owned by councillors or community organizations who feel that publicity is needed due to some sort of public interest. So we do not make a distinction between political and non-political materials. Mr. Wong Kwok-pan, Mr. CHAN Chi-chuen has asked a very good question. Unauthorized display of such publicity materials has plagued Hong Kong in many districts for many years, Secretary. Even a few years ago, I saw in places where we have many tourists are covered by publicity materials hung up by the Falun Gong. You can go to Hong Kong, KCLC, MTL station, Wong Tai Shin, Jim Sa Tsui, so long as there are a lot of tourists. According to the Secretary, they will be removed as soon as identified. For so many years, the FHD has not discovered these banners. Were their eyes covered? What covered their eyes? What are the reasons? Secretary. Well, in reply to Mr. Wong's question, as I said, if we sport any banners displayed without the requisite permission or in unauthorized areas, they will be removed at once. However, if there are owners in charge there, we will first communicate with the owners and remind them of our relevant legislation and take action as appropriate. Mr. Yip Kwok Him. Thank you, President. I thank Mr. CHAN Chi-chuen for raising an issue of concern to us as well. These non-commercial publicity materials are placed on the roadside and road junctions. The situation is very serious. As Mr. Chen said, for banners of legislators and district councillors, they are always removed at once and we are fined afterwards. This is so unfair. There is no consistent treatment. So according to the Secretary, if there is somebody around, you may communicate with them first. But even near government headquarters, you see so many banners. Every day I drive back to the council and I see so many banners. I don't think they are hung at authorized areas and there is no one to take care of them. So Secretary, can you take action using the same standard for all types of materials? According to Mr. CHAN Chi-chuen, some banners are put there by organizations professing love for Hong Kong and the country. Now, let's not make a distinction. There should be equity treatment, including to all parties, including Falun Gong. So from a safety point of view, shouldn't the administration take action? Secretary, I thank Mr. Ip for his suggestion. To ensure that we have a parity treatment for everything and to ensure we take enforcement action is our responsibility. But as I pointed out, as a matter of procedure, for banners that can be removed at once, we will. But if there are persons in charge, we will always have a process of communication. So this is our enforcement procedures. Ms. Starry Lee, it is our core value to have parity treatment for everybody and to comply with the law. Well, Falun Gong has occupied many areas of streets for a long time without any application and approval. Secretary, you can ascertain from FHD, they've never taken action. They say that it's politically sensitive, so it's left to the police, and the police also say that it's politically sensitive. So for us, who are the good guys. We bear the brunt of enforcement, and for these organizations such as Falun Gong, you can see their publicity materials everywhere, every day. Please discuss with the HHD. I agree that you should act according to the relevant legislation and have parity treatment for everyone. So, do you agree that you cannot continue to deal with these publicity materials in a consistent manner? All publicity materials, unapproved and unauthorized, should be removed at once, and the department should take enforcement action at once. Secretary. Of course, some members mention a particular organization and other organizations are mentioned another. Well, as I said at the outstart, there have been two organizations, so we do have parity treatment for organizations. If you have hypothetical questions, it's hard for me to answer. But as I said, whether it's from this organization referred to or another one referred to by other members, we adopt the same attitude. Mr. Albert Chen. Chairman, perhaps Falun Gong members have spiritual powers to protect them, so the banners are not seen by FGC. But then banners from Caring Hong Kong Power, well, they are put there in many layers, up to 3 layers, and they can be seen by others. Secretary, it may appear that FGHD has the power to take action, but it shows that in the past year, in many areas, in busy areas in particular, there are banners hung there up to a few layers. They have never been removed or tackled. I think there is dereliction of duty on the part of FGHD staff. So, Secretary, please do not be misled by your staff. Please come to your question. I hope the Secretary can give us a specific answer. In how many days will this question be fixed? If you cannot handle this problem, how can you lead such a big bureau? There are so many people here in the council questioning you. Can you give us a specific time frame? Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Chen, for your question. Well, the situation is not as simple as you think. It's not that we can remove them all in a day, because you know it is a dynamic situation. Some banners can be displayed there for a short while and then removed, and after your operation they can be put back again. So we have to be vigilant and to keep in view the situation. If there are irregularities, we will take action under the management scheme. I'm talking about the existing banners, not new banners. Please repeat your question. Well, for my banners, they were removed and was fined a few $1,000s. So in areas where there are already unauthorized publicity materials. So can you give us a specific time frame for removing the existing unauthorized publicity materials that have been there for a long time? Secretary, as I said, is a process of enforcement. If the publicity materials are found to be unauthorized, either they do not have prior approval, or they're put at unauthorized places, they will be removed at once. However, if the owner is there, well, in our enforcement process, we will communicate with the owner first and take action afterwards. We'll spend 23 minutes 45 seconds on this question.
Second question, Mr. Wong Ting-kwong. Thank you, President. It has been reported that the chairman of the Hong Kong Trade Development Council, TDC, indicated last month that the usage of the H-chain link of the Hong Kong Convention and Exhibition Centre, Hong Kong CEC, which has been completed for over 2 years, has now reached saturation. And HKCEC has so far turned down 50 and 150 applications for renting exhibition and convention venues, respectively. He also pointed out that as the Asia World Expo, AWE, is remotely located, most exhibitors and buyers are unwilling to travel long distance between the two exhibition venues. Therefore, it is not feasible for HKCEC to collaborate with AWE to provide exhibition spaces under the one show, two locations approach. In this connection, would the government inform this Council A whether it knows the number of applications for renting exhibition and convention venues turned down by HKCEC due to inadequate venues over the past 3 years, and the economic loss caused to Hong Kong, whether it has compiled statistics on the number of days in 2012 when the usage of all the major exhibition venues in Hong Kong reached saturation. If it has of the figures, B, given that the authorities have all along indicated that they have been encouraging collaboration between TDC, HKCEC, and AWE on exhibition projects of the specific incentive measures taken by the authorities and the number of exhibitions held under the one show, two locations approach over the past 3 years. Given that the TDC chairman has pointed out that the one show, two locations approach is not feasible, of the authorities' measures to practically resolve the collaboration problem between the two exhibition facilities, and C, of the authorities' progress in assessing whether it is necessary to expand the convention and exhibition venues in Hong Kong, of the time when specific proposals would be put forward, whether the authorities have assessed how Hong Kong's convention and exhibition industry has been affected by the development plans of the convention and exhibition industry in neighboring countries and regions, including the potential loss suffered by Hong Kong as a result of its failure to increase convention and exhibition venues. If they have, of the details; if not, the reasons for that. Secretary for Commerce and Economic Development, President. A, there are two major convention and exhibition facilities in Hong Kong, namely the Hong Kong Convention and Exhibition Centre, or Hong Kong CEC, and the Asia World Expo, AWE. According to the Hong Kong and Exhibition Centre Management Limited, in the past 3 years, i.e. from year 2010 to 2012, they turned down a total of 44 applications for renting exhibition venues because of shortage of space at HKCEC, and among them, only 13 cases were concerned with trade exhibitions. For the same period, Hong Kong CEC also declined a total of 89 applications for conference venues due to a shortage of space. We do not have sufficient information to assess the relevant economic loss to Hong Kong, but it is worth noting that the targeted days for most of these applications indeed fell on the peak seasons of the exhibitions industry. AWE, on the other hand, had not rejected any application owing to a shortage of space in the last 3 years. Generally speaking, the supply of exhibition and convention facilities at Hong Kong CEC and AWE is tight during the purchasing seasons. In 2012, the exhibition facilities of HKCEC reached saturation on 41 show days, which were mainly during the peak seasons of the exhibition industry. AWE was almost full for 8 days in 2012, including the period during the September Hong Kong Jewelry and Gem Fair, as well as the October China Sourcing Fair, Electronics and Components Autumn Edition. B, the government has been encouraging the Hong Kong Trade Development Council, TDC, and other exhibition organizers to better utilize their existing exhibition and convention facilities of Hong Kong through the adoption of various approaches, including one show, two venues. However, how should the shows be staged and the approaches to be adopted are in fact commercial decisions to be made by exhibition organizers based on the need of exhibitors and buyers. Successful implementation of the one show, two venues approach requires close coordination between venue operators and fair organizers. Sufficient time should also be allowed for exhibitors and buyers to adapt to such changes. A good example is the Hong Kong Jewelry and Gem Fair, which has been held concurrently at Hong Kong CEC and AWE since September 2009. The number of exhibitors has increased from 3,061 in 2009 to 3,526 in 2012, i.e. an increase of 15%, while the number of participants also grew from 49,146 to 51,977, i.e. an increase of 33% for the same period. We understand that the operator of AWE is also discussing ways with the private fair organizer to expand further the fair at AWE in 2013 and beyond. The government would continue to offer assistance as appropriate, for example, in the area of transportation arrangements. With the joint efforts of various parties, a number of transportation facilitation measures have been put in place on days with events at AWE, which include inter alia, the provision of numerous bus routes connecting various places at Hong Kong Island, Kowloon, and NT by franchise bus operators. Besides, the MTRC would also provide concessionary fares on days with events at the AWE. In fact, in the previous 3 years, i.e. from the year 2010 to 2012, TDC has been operating shuttle bus services running between HKCEC and AWE during the electronics and houseware fairs held in April and October each year, respectively. With a view to boosting the people flow in both venues and facilitating buyers in purchasing goods. C. The government is closely monitoring and assessing the demand for convention and exhibition facilities in Hong Kong, as well as the development of conventions and exhibitions in our nearby countries and places. At present, Hong Kong CEC and AW mainly face a shortage of space. During the peak seasons of the exhibition industry, we will continue to liaise with the industry and the operators of the 2 exhibition venues to enhance the cooperation between Hong Kong CEC and AWE and to facilitate more effective utilization of the overall convention and exhibition facilities in Hong Kong. We will also encourage the exhibition organizers and those planning to organize conferences to hold their events in non-peak seasons or use other convention and exhibition venues in Hong Kong where possible. In the long run, we will keep on assessing the demand and implement suitable measures or increase the supply of convention and exhibition facilities according to the need. Thank you, President. The speaker is off mic. Well, our computer needs some time to adjust after the holiday break to handle the heavy workload. For those who have pressed the button according to this system, we have Mrs. Regina Ye, Mr. Ronnie Tong, Mr. Jeffrey Lam, Dr. Lo Wai-kwok, Mr. Jeffrey Lam, Mr. Lo Wai-kwok, Mr. YIU Si-wing, Mr. CHUNG Kwok-pan, Dr. Kenneth Chan, Dr. Elizabeth Kwok, Ms. Emily Lau, and Mr. Andrew Leung. For those whose name have not been mentioned, if you want to ask questions, please press the button again. Mr. Wong Ting-kwong. President, in the May reply, the government says that in 2012, there were only 8 days where AWE almost reached its capacity. How would the administration leverage on the completion of the Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge and the other facilities that are coming on stream to increase the utilization rate of AWE? Secretary, according to information provided by AWE, in 2012, the total space rented out reached 20 million square feet, an increase of more than 20% over 2011, and it's the second consecutive year where a 20% increase was registered. And there were more than 210 days whereby major exhibition and recreational events were staged at AWE. As Mr. Wong Ting-kwong has said, we must offer more support to AWE so that they can seize the opportunity. We are going to develop MEHK and provide or promote targeted publicity. We would leverage on the completion of the Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge and the facilities to be completed on Lantau Island, so as to give full play to the strength and capacity of AWE. We will try to attract more exhibition and conventions to be staged in Hong Kong, including those to be staged at AWE. We are going to attract more organizers and exhibitors to Hong Kong so as to ensure that Hong Kong is truly a hub for exhibition and conferences. Mr. Jeffrey Lam, to be a trade hub and an exhibition hub, we need both software and hardware. This year, the exhibition industry faces a problem of lack of space, and the HKCEC suffers from insufficient space because that's the venue of choice for AWE, where it's remotely located, and not many people are willing to go there. That's a disadvantage to them, and of course the capacity is different. I've asked the CE to announce long-term infrastructural plans, both in terms of software and hardware, and I also suggest that we should expand our exhibition and conference facilities. It has been reported that the government would consider certain proposals to expand the facilities. For example, the 3 government office buildings at Wan Chai, and also the bus terminus in Wan Chai, and the previous Wan Chai playground will be made use of under the proposals. We don't know when these plans would be implemented, and maybe you are facing certain obstacles, and when can the plans be implemented? Secretary, as in the past, we'll continue to monitor the need for exhibition and conference facilities. At this stage, what we are trying to achieve is to enhance collaboration between the 2 facilities so as to make the best use of our existing capacity. Mr. Jeffrey Lam is correct that many organizers find HKCEC in Wan Chai more favorably located, and the utilization of AWE, as Mr. Wong Ting-kwong has pointed out, can also seize the opportunity offered by the completion of the Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge. We hope that there can be more collaboration. For example, 1 show, 2 venues, or 2 shows, 2 venues, and the like, so as to enhance utilization. On the whole, we will continue to monitor the overall demand for such facilities, the external economy, and the developments in other places of the exhibition industry, and we will assess whether our facilities are sufficient, and then we will make decisions to meet long-term needs. Of course, we look at the external environment and also the utilization of our venues in Hong Kong. And we also need to assess the transportation measures. So we do all these to meet needs from various quarters in Hong Kong. Was your question not answered? Well, I mentioned the 3 locations, 3 venues concerned. Is the plan under consideration? Well, I understand the HKCEC has identified some possible sites for their proposals. For example, the 3 government buildings and the existing playground. They have made proposals for expansion. We'll look into various factors, the existing utilization, the selected size, and also the environmental assessment. We'll look into all this carefully. Concerning the stage 3 of HKCEC expansion, we haven't made a decision yet. When there are concrete proposals, we would certainly conduct a consultation exercise. Mr. Andrew Leung, I'm referring to part C of the reply. I wonder if the Secretary is aware that in Macau there are 8 million square meters of venues, and Guangzhou 30 million square meter, and they are going to have another 300,000 square meters in Guangzhou, and they are going to add 100,000 more later. But in this industry, is a the winner takes all. Has the administration assessed how expansion can be carried out? And for a single facility, it should be at least one with 80,000 square meters. Can expansion be carried out at AWE or alternatively at HKCEC? If we do nothing, in 10 years, the industry will be gone for good. Are you going to do any of this, Secretary? As I have indicated in the main reply, we are very concerned about the development of exhibition and convention industry in neighboring countries or places. And we want to promote Hong Kong as a hub for conference and exhibitions. And as I've said, we must better utilize our resources, our facilities, especially the two facilities should cooperate more closely. And I've mentioned concepts such as one show, two venues, or two shows, two venues. We know that in the Pearl River Delta, also in other places, there's been development with the industry, such as Macau and Guangzhou, and in other countries, such as Singapore, they are developing their facilities. And in terms of provision of space, they have been more flexible. Although competition from the Pearl River Delta is getting more and more intense, but there's still also room for cooperation. It's not like Mr. Leung has said that it's the winner takes all. There is also room, in my view, for cooperation so that we can do more in promotion and make the pie bigger, and also to enrich the people's experience with conferences and exhibition. We liaise very closely with the Macau authorities, including organizing the visits by the overseas organizers to such facilities. We are also going to cooperate with tourism organizations in the region to promote multiple destination business. Well, you are not concerned about the SME's ability to locate suitable venues. They cannot go to another place. You are just saying that you would promote the cooperation of the venue operators. Well, I think the Secretary has replied your questions in accordance with government policy. If you want to have a debate, you have to find another occasion. Mrs. Regina Yip. There's a body of opinion in Hong Kong that if we compete with other places in our neighbors, the bigger our venues, the better, and the venue should be centrally located. But you look at other places where the convention and exhibition venues can be expanded, and where they have big facilities, they are away from central locations because they want to develop the new areas, and also to avoid traffic congestion, such as what we have seen in North Wan Chai. With the completion of the new CGO, North Wan Chai has become more and more congested in terms of transport. We want to have new bridgehead economic developments, and in our neighboring countries, they are expanding their facilities in new areas. So would you consider having more such facilities in Tung Chung, and at the same time you enhance the transport transportation network so that we can have more space to use. Well, in answering Mr. Wong Ting-kwong's question, I already said that each venue, each facility enjoy its own strength and advantages. Some would like the venue to be centrally located, for example, in Wan Chai, but with the coming on stream of Hong Kong-Zhuhai Macau Bridge, other exhibitors and conference organizers may like to get a venue close to the airport. So we are going to consider all such factors, including the advantages enjoyed by different facilities and also the demand of buyers and organizers. So a basket of factors will be considered in deciding how future expansion proposals should be considered and how the public should be consulted over such plans. Mr. Ronnie Tong, the Secretary has admitted that AWE is less competitive because of certain constraints, not least the transportation arrangements. Many people have asked for the pier near on Lantau Island be turned into a pop-up boundary crossing point. That would enhance usage. Are you going to convert the pier there into a pop-up boundary crossing point and so as to enhance the competitiveness of AWE? Well, there are supplementary measures for AWE, not just the pier. We have a lot of complementary transportation measures for AWE. For non-event days, we have 6 franchise routes, E routes, S routes, and also the MTR to connect AWE with various places in Hong Kong. When there's an event, AWE will also provide point-to-point X1 route from Tung Chung to AWE, and there are also another 10 franchise bus routes going to the airport, and they will stop at AWE when there is an event there. And there are other measures that we can implement as well. On an event day, if you use the MTR, you only pay a concessionary fare of $52 for a return trip. So it's very convenient. In the future, there may be other expansion plans. We have an open mind. How about the pier there? The pier is not for Hong Kong people. It's for mainland businessmen. You don't have to explain. Please allow the Secretary to respond. Thank you, Mr. Tong. As I've said, I'm going to consider a basket of factors. After the commissioning of Hong Kong-Zhuhai Macau Bridge, there will be an advantage conferred on the AWE, and we will certainly consider all the relevant environmental factors. We spent more than 24 minutes on this, but there's a hiccup, so I will allow one more supplementary question here. Mr. YIU Si-wing, according to the reply from the administration, some 44 applications for use of venue and 89 cases for conference applications were turned down. Would you be liaising with these applicants so that they will continue to organize and arrange such events in Hong Kong? Well, the exhibition and conference industry is important to Hong Kong. So we attach importance to this industry. With the additional funding from the government, the Hong Kong Tourism Board, has set up the MEHK for expansion programs to develop the conferences and exhibitions in Hong Kong. With the MEHK set up from the records, some 5,800 activities received their support and assistance. And for 2,300, through active lobbying by the Hong Kong Tourism Board, they decided to come to Hong Kong. And in 2012, more than 1,800 events received support from the board under MEHK, of which 900 decided to come to Hong Kong through the lobbying and promotion. So MEHK will continue to assist international organizers to identify suitable venues and facilities in Hong Kong. One-stop service will be provided, including conducting tour visits, on-site visits, publicity, and other logistics, advisory, and referral services will also be provided. As for whether these international conferences will ultimately be held in Hong Kong, well, the stakeholders' interest would be the determining factor. MEHK would try to tie in with other parties' efforts. And we have seen that through MEHK's coordinations, and if they did encounter a shortage of space, they would try to make referrals so that the event could be organized elsewhere.
Question 3, Mr. Steven Ho. Thank you, Mr. President. The subsidiary legislation which bans trawling activities in Hong Kong waters came into operation on the 31st of December 2012. In this connection, the government has introduced a one-off assistance scheme for the affected fishermen, including making ex gratia payments and providing loans through the Fisheries Development Loan Fund to them. However, quite a number of people have pointed out that the assistance scheme cannot provide concrete assistance to those affected. Moreover, although some affected owners of trawler vessels wish to apply for loans so as to switch to fishing in the mainland waters, the mainland authorities have long ago implemented double control policies for the floating fishing vessels of Hong Kong and Macau, which impose restrictions on the number of such vessels and their engine power. In addition, some practitioners of related trades told me that their trades are also affected by the legislation on trawl ban. For instance, the fish farming industry can no longer obtain the supply of trash fish from trawler vessels as quality feed for mariculture, whilst fish collectors and ice maker vessels have lost their business on delivering fish for trawler vessels and supplying ice to them respectively. In this connection, will the government inform this council, first, of the latest progress of the government's disbursement of ex gratia payments to the owners of the approximately 1,100 trawler vessels affected by the legislation on trawl ban, the criteria adopted by the Fishermen Claims Appeal Board for handling appeals relating to ex gratia payments, whether the government has explained comprehensively to the fishermen the criteria adopted by the Interdepartmental Working Group for vetting their applications and those adopted by the Appeal Board for handling appeals, if so, of the details, if not the reasons for that. Second, of the current progress of the discussions between the government and the relevant mainland authorities about trawlers operating on the mainland waters and the policies and means employed to help resolve the problems. If such policies or means are not available, of the reasons for that. Third, whether the government has any concrete assistance measures to help practitioners of the related trades to maintain their livelihood. If it has, of the details, if not the reasons for that. Secretary for Food and Health. Mr. President, in order to restore our damaged seabed and the depleted marine resources as early as possible and put the further development of our marine ecosystems and fisheries industry on a sustainable footing, the government proposed and the Legislative Council enacted in May 2011 the relevant subsidiary legislation that clears the way for us to implement a trawl ban in Hong Kong waters. That is the trawl ban, with effect from the 31st of December 2012. The Electoral Finance Committee also approved in June 2011 funds for a one-off assistance package to trawler vessel owners, local deckhands and fish collector owners affected by the trawl ban and other related measures. As part of the package, the disbursement of ex gratia allowance, EGA, to affected trawler owners for loss of fishing grounds as a result of the trawl ban is nearing completion. In carving up the EGA payable to different groups of claimants, we work to ensure that the allowance paid would be proportional to the impact of the trawl ban on them. The FC approved the payment of 2 types of EGA, therefore, which are based on the following guiding principles and to be processed as such. First, for inshore trawlers which operate wholly or partly in Hong Kong waters, the owners will be most affected when the statutory trawl ban takes effect, as they will lose their fishing grounds in Hong Kong waters. The EGA payable to individual inshore trawler owners will depend on the number of successful applications as well as other apportionment criteria, such as vessel type, vessel length, engine power, equipment on board, the time spent on trawling in Hong Kong waters, and/or the amount of production. And second, apart from the most affected inshore trawlers, there are also large trawlers which generally do not operate in Hong Kong waters. This group of trawlers may lose the opportunity of trawling the fishing grounds in Hong Kong waters on their return journey. Relatively speaking, the impact of the trawl ban on these larger trawlers is far less than those facing the inshore trawlers. Having taken into account the need to maintain relativity with inshore trawlers, which will be affected most, the FC approved that a lump sum EGA of $150,000 should be paid to each larger trawler if the relevant application is successful. My reply to the various parts of the question is as follows. First, upon its establishment in August 2011, the Interdepartmental Working Group, the IWG, started forthwith its work relating to the applications for EGA. Guided by the FC paper pertaining to the assistance package, the IWG mapped out the eligibility criteria and other relevant requirements that EGA applicants have to meet. These criteria and requirements had been clearly set out in the guidance notes for registration that were distributed to applicants. The IWG went about processing each application in accordance with the established procedures on the basis of the information furnished by the applicant and other data relating to the applicant, including details of vessel inspection on the date of registration and information obtained from other departments or organizations. After making initial decisions, the IWG wrote to each applicant stating clearly the information and justifications that had been taken into consideration. If applicants have any objection to initial decisions, they may submit further justifications or representations. The IWG made its final decisions after considering further justifications, if any. At present, the IWG has largely completed its assessment of the applications for EGA. The IWG informed eligible applicants of the results and the amount of EGA payable. Some eligible applicants have already received the EGA. Should an applicant be aggrieved by the formal decision of the IWG, the applicant may lodge an appeal with the Fishermen Claims Appeal Board within 1 month. The government set up an FCAB on the 5th of November 2012 for processing the appeals. The attachment gives us terms of reference. The FCAB is made up of a non-official chairman and 4 non-official members. His tenure of office will last until work on all the appeal cases has been completed. The Secretariat of the FCAB is attached to the Food and Health Bureau. Second, the policy of the mainland government to control the growth in the number and total engine power of capture vessels operating in mainland waters, that is, the double control policy, has been in place for some years. The policy applies to mainland-based fishing vessels as well as mobile fishing vessels in Hong Kong or Macau. The AFCD has been liaising closely with the mainland government. We've conveyed to them the concerns expressed by Hong Kong fishermen and made arrangements for representatives of mainland authorities to meet with local fishermen and brief them on policy requirements. The FCD visited the Hong Kong and Macau Mobile Fishermen's Business Office of Guangdong Province with fishermen representatives on the 12th of December 2012 for an exchange of views with mainland authorities in relation to mobile fishing vessels. At present, most Hong Kong trawlers already obtain capture permits from mainland government to operate in mainland waters. The FCD understands that the mainland allows owners of mobile fishing vessels holding valid capture permits to upgrade their vessels so long as there's no increase to the engine power. As such, trawler owners may upgrade their vessels to suit the requirements for operating in mainland waters outside Hong Kong. They may also consider forming a fishing fleet or switching to non-trawling operations so that they can pursue fishery activities of a sustainable nature in the mainland. Trawler owners may apply for loans under the Fisheries Development Loan Fund for financing users for upgrading, for example. Third, we believe that the trawl ban would not significantly impact on related trades, because ancillary services will still be required by the main remaining fishing vessels, including those operating outside Hong Kong and local non-trawling vessels. Following the trawl ban, some trawlers that used to operate mainly in Hong Kong waters may also operate in the nearby waters outside Hong Kong. Therefore, they will continue to require the service of the related trades. At present, most fish collectors receive fish from fishing vessels in mainland waters. The IWG will assess if any bona fide fish collectors have genuinely been affected by the trawl ban. Depending on the result of its assessment, the IWG will consider providing appropriate assistance to those fish collectors that are directly affected by the trawl ban. As far as we understand, there's at present only one vessel in Tuen Mun that engages in making ice. The FCD has already contacted the owner of the ice maker to understand his situation. The owner has asked the government to assist him to move the operation ashore. We'll continue to keep in view the impact of the trawl ban on his operation and explore appropriate support measures accordingly. Upon implementation of the trawl ban, the supply of trash fish or small fish may be reduced. However, we believe that the impact on fish farming would not be significant because the AFCD will continue to promote the use of pellet feed to replace the trash fish that is traditionally used as feed for aquaculture. Apart from implementing the trawl ban and a series of fisheries management measures such as registration of local fishing vessels and prohibiting non-local fishing vessels from fishing in Hong Kong waters, the government will continue to explore other practicable measures to promote the sustainable development of the fishing industry. Thank you. Mr. Steven HO. In fact, the Bureau has consulted the fishing industry a number of times, but after listening to fishermen's views, the Bureau very seldom based on those views in mapping out its policies. In February, they applied to be effective fishermen under the trawl ban. They waited for 9 months. They've been panicking for 9 months. It's only in the middle of October that they received the first letter from the Bureau, which said that they're totally failed. Half failed or not failed. There's no amount. The fishermen want to know the EGA amounts before they know their direction in future. Just before Christmas, in about mid-December, and some friends received a notification only after Christmas, the exact EGA amount. Now, the trawl ban was imposed on the 31st of December. If the fishermen received a notice only a few days before that, they could not make preparation. Now, that's the first phase of implementation. Would you please be brief? Yes? Well, after issuing the letters, as the Secretary said, a number of reasons were given to the fishermen. For example, why did they fail? Why did they fail? But the administration did not announce statistics. For example, inspection records, how many cases, and then 2009 to 2010 fishing records. Now, these data were not disclosed. So where's the fairness of the fishing policy? It's not clear. So the question is, not a few fishermen pointed out that in the same body of waters, different vessels are operating similarly, but they receive different EGA payment, sometimes just half the payment of others. Well, data should be disclosed, even if they're saying that it's NASA data. And why should there be different payments? And what about the method of disbursement? He must give the details. Give us the details. If he's not going to provide the details, he should give us the reason. Secretary? Well, according to the remarks of Mr. Ho, I understand that in terms of timing, quite a long time has elapsed before the affected vessel owners were notified. Well, that's not satisfactory, I admit. But then we have to understand that in relation to the assessment of fishing vessels, the number of vessels involved is quite big. According to the AFCD data, for the eligible vessels, 19 vessels and 700 larger vessels. And only 90-odd cases failed. And 40-odd cases are still being processed. So altogether, 1,117 cases. So the IWG had to consider data in detail. For example, the degree of reliance of the vessels on Hong Kong waters. Well, the IWG is not following each and every vessel every day. So it has to resort to other data and evidence to indicate how many days in a year a particular vessel is fishing in Hong Kong waters. So the IWG has to use other information, for example, the type, size, length, facilities on board, etc. And then relevant government departments in their routine inspections also provided data. So the IWG has to consider all these data for just one single case. And because of this, we're concerned that affected vessel owners may not be satisfied. An owner may feel that the degree of the impact on him is more or less the same as that on others, but he receives a different amount of EGA. That's why we've set up an appeal board, the Fishermen Claims Appeal Board, because we cannot follow each and every vessel all the time. Now, we have several mechanisms here. First of all, we have an interdepartmental working group, the IWG, which covers the whole series of factors I just mentioned, which are very comprehensive. This feeling of unfairness can be addressed by the FCAB, which comprises non-official members with people from the legal profession and other professionals. The appeal board can ensure that vessel owners can, through this mechanism, receive an EGA that fairly reflects his needs. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Tam Yu-chung. Mr. President, some fishermen friends complained that sometimes for several vessels operating in the same way, some owners are given more, some less. As Mr. Steven HO said, sometimes there may be a difference of 50% or 100%. Well, some vessel owners will no longer be able to fish. So we're concerned. Now, this IWG has had a number of meetings with them. The government said that from 2009 to 2011, the AFCD had inspection records and also inspection records for all the typhoon shelters. But then fishermen are concerned whether or not such records are accurate. Just recently, there were reports that even statistics collected by the Census and Statistics Department were not accurate. So fishermen are concerned that their EGA amounts may be affected. So what solutions do we have? Secretary, Mr. President, this is not related to the accuracy of the inspection records. I think the vessel owners are rather worried about whether or not the records can comprehensively reflect their needs. Of course, these records are random records, because every time when AFCD goes out for an inspection, it may not come across each and every vessel, and the vessel owner can choose where to fish as he wishes. Members may have noted that the IWG does not just refer to these records. I note that most vessel owners are concerned about the records. That shouldn't be the only reason, because we had a number of reference data. For example, type of vessels, with 5 to 7 types of fishing vessels. And then for each type of vessels, we have to measure the length. There are different lengths and suitability for different types of waters. Also, equipment on board varies in terms of nature and number. For example, the nets, the trawling nets may be different. So I believe we got comprehensive materials. Of course, some vessel owners pinpointed the inspection records. Maybe there's a misunderstanding. Maybe they misunderstand that we only or mainly rely on these inspection records, but in fact we rely on a whole series of data and materials. Mr. Arili, Mr. President, we can understand the sentiments of the fishermen. With the trawl ban, they only knew the EGA amounts very near the end of last year. And some cases are still being processed. They're not sure about their future livelihood. Can the Secretary undertake here that given the specialties and special circumstances and complexity of these cases, a more relaxed approach would be adopted, such that fishermen will, as soon as possible, obtain their EGA so that they can plan for their future, and a small group should be set up to assist the fishermen to go through this transformation process. Secretary, concerning the first suggestion, rather than adopting a relaxed approach or lenient approach, I have to say that the scheme was approved by the Finance Committee. The main spirit of that scheme is not to evenly distribute the resources for assistance. Rather, the scheme is to be quite stringent. It is to reflect the degree of impact on individual vessel owners in the disbursement of EGA amounts. I fully agree to your second suggestion. We should cover the compensation aspects. The IWG and the appeal board apart from those two mechanisms, we'll have a special arrangement to offer comprehensive assistance to vessel owners affected by the trawl ban such that they can have sustainable development. Because not just inshore trawlers are affected by the trawl ban. There are harbor works, etc. Those also affect fishing vessels. Mr. CHAN Kwok-pan, as the Secretary said, is only in the last few days that data were given to the fishermen. This indicates that the IWG worked rather hastily. Can the Bureau consider extending the tenure of office of the IWG? But that's not my question. Now, fishing is very professional. In future, EGA cases would be handled by an appeal board. What about the appeal board members? Do they possess expert knowledge? And very often, the operation of such an appeal board relies on information passed to them by the government. There may be wronged cases. Well, can you ask your question, please? Well, I think the appeal board should not be preempted by prejudice, and members should possess professional knowledge and expertise in order to pass judgments. Secretary, the appeal board includes a chairman and 4 members, all of them being non-officials. This indicates that we emphasize fairness in this mechanism. We would like to exclude the element of presumption or prejudice. As for professional judgment, there is a difficulty. If you want to have somebody with legal knowledge or independent views, if you want that person to concurrently possess knowledge and expertise on fishing, it would be rather difficult. In a legal framework or statutory framework that emphasizes fairness, we always emphasize independence of the members, as well as procedural justice. So those will come first. Professional knowledge and expertise will rely on our supply, and we can commission or employ the help of professionals for them. The Secretary exceeded 17 minutes in the main reply, so I will allow for one more supplementary question. Mr. Sin Chung Kai, well, there are 150,000 larger trawlers. How many have already been given EGA? And for inshore trawlers, may I have the number? And how many of them have already received your compensation? How many are in the appeal process? Secretary, Mr. President, concerning Mr. Sin Chung Kai's questions, I may have to furnish some of the data later. For appeal cases, up to the 8th of January 2013, we received 240 appeals. Other data will have to be submitted later. Can the Secretary explain the main reasons for the appeals? Secretary, any supplement? Mr. President, I believe it must be because of dissatisfaction about the amount of EGA. I have to emphasize that in this compensation mechanism that was discussed by the FC, the principle is that the amount of compensation should, as far as possible, reflect the degree of impact. The compensation amounts are not to be evenly distributed. Therefore, the IWG seriously assesses the impact on individual vessel owners by the trawl ban, and that will be reflected by the amount of compensation. Well, I think we have to stop here for this question.
Question 4, Dr. LO Wai-kwok. President, some members of the construction industry pointed out that while major infrastructure projects of the government at present provide sustained impetus for the construction industry and the economy of Hong Kong, the construction industry faces problems such as aging workforce, labor shortage, skills mismatch, and succession gap. As shown by the findings of a survey, construction sites with works in progress suffer from an average labor shortage of 15%, posing challenges to the progress, works, and safety of sites. Regarding the shortage of construction workers, will the government inform this council? A. Whether it has reviewed the effectiveness of the enhanced construction manpower training scheme introduced in September 2010? If it has, of the details. Whether it will consider extending the training period of the scheme and expanding the trades under the scheme to cover welders, plasterers, glaziers, marble workers, painters and decorators, as well as plumbers. If it will, of the details. If not, the reasons for that. B. Whether the authorities will consider outsourcing some training courses to trade unions and certification bodies to increase the training quota and recruit new entrants to join the construction industry. And C. As some members of the industry have estimated that the demand for construction workers will peak in the middle of this year, of the authorities' new proactive measures to expeditiously address the difficulties caused by the shortage of construction workers. Thank you. Secretary for Development. Mr. President and members, good morning. We've maintained close liaison with the Construction Industry Council, CIC, and the construction industry, as well as conducted manpower surveys, studies, and organized workshops to keep track of the latest manpower situation. With major infrastructure projects coming on stream, there will be an increase in manpower demand in the construction industry. Employment statistics show that there is room for training more local workers to meet the demand. And as early as May 2010, we obtained approval of the LegCo for a funding of $100 million to strengthen the support for the CIC to implement various initiatives, including the Enhanced Construction Manpower Training Scheme, ECMTS, to enhance the skill levels of local workers. The Development Bureau comprehensively reviewed the manpower situation of the construction industry in June 2011. The findings reveal that in the next few years, though total manpower supply stands adequate, individual trades will face problems such as labor shortage and acute aging workforce. In this connection, in April 2012, we sought an additional funding of $220 million from LegCo to strengthen the relevant training initiatives. The following is my reply to Mr. Lo's question. A. ECMTS targets at training personnel for individual trades in great demand, in particular those facing issues of labor shortage, acute aging workforce, and difficulties in recruiting new entrants. Statistics show that ECMTS needs to train up approximately 6,000 new entrants to meet the manpower demand in the next few years. Since the rolling out of the scheme in September 2010, the CIC has already completed 4 phases of the scheme, with over 2,000 trainees. About 60% of them were aged below 35, which shows that the scheme is effective in attracting young people to join the industry. To ensure better employment opportunities for the trainees, we require relevant public works contractors to employ graduate trainees of the scheme starting from the end of December 2012. I'm confident that the CIC will meet its target by the end of 2014. The Bureau will continue to monitor the effectiveness of the scheme. Prior to launching a new phase of the scheme, the CIC consults the industry and takes into account the findings of manpower studies, trainee intake and placement of graduates of various trades. The number of trades under the scheme has progressively increased from 4 in the first phase to 10 at present. Furthermore, the CIC adjusts the training periods of individual trades, taking into account actual industry needs and the feedbacks from trade associations. Since this mechanism is effective, we encourage contractors to reflect manpower demands of various trades to the CIC. In relation to the second and the third part of Mr. Lo's question, this is my answer. To meet long-term manpower demand, we, in collaboration with the CIC, have drawn up a comprehensive manpower strategy for construction workers, which covers 4 key areas. First is manpower demand and supply forecast. The percentage of labor shortage quoted by Mr. Lo may be based on the questionnaire survey conducted by the Hong Kong Construction Association and the Hong Kong Federation of Electrical and Mechanical Contractors in November 2012. Since 1976, the Census and Statistics Department has released employment statistics on construction sites on a quarterly basis. The statistics for the third quarter of 2012 show that the percentage of vacancies of manual workers at construction sites is only about 1%. We'll coordinate with trade associations, labor unions, the CIC and the Census and Statistics Department to conduct similar manpower surveys in a collaborative manner. At the same time, the CIC will consult the construction industry on a half-yearly basis to gauge the medium and short-term manpower supply and demand. As I hope the industry will actively reflect their views to the CIC will engage a consultant to assess the manpower supply and demand in the industry over a 10-year horizon, so as to provide recognized reference information for the CIC and us to formulate relevant policies. The second key area is to increase manpower supply. The CIC has rolled out various initiatives to attract secondary school graduates, people who are in between jobs, ethnic minorities and new arrivals join the industry. We've also launched with the CIC the build-up publicity campaign to improve the image of the industry. Our survey reviewed that the number of young people who are likely to join the industry has nearly doubled compared to the time before the campaign. In the past 2 years, the number of registered construction workers has also increased by about 15%. These show that our publicity campaign is effective. To complement our work, the CIC has been striving to increase the number of training places. With the assistance of the Development Bureau, the CIC has identified additional training grounds to increase the annual training places under the scheme from about 1,200 to about 2,300 this year. Mr. Lo asked if we would outsource training courses. As a matter of fact, to keep the number of training places close to market demands, there are outsourcing arrangements for training courses. Under the Contractor Cooperative Training Scheme, CCTS, led by the CIC, certain training courses are subsidized by the CIC, whereas contractors hire and then train the trainees. Since December 2011, we've required relevant public works contractors to join CCTS, and have also encouraged other public bodies to take part in it. CCTS will provide about 1,500 training places this year. Taking into account the above initiatives and regular courses of the CIC, the overall training places of the CIC will increase from about 2,000 in 2009 to about 6,000 this year. This reflects that the CIC has substantially increased its training quota to meet the needs of the industry. Regarding in-service workers, it is an established policy of the CIC to encourage general workers to enhance their skills and register as skilled or semi-skilled workers. Apart from organizing skills enhancement courses for trades with a relatively low passing rate of trade tests, the CIC is planning to cooperate with qualified organizations with a view to contracting out 5 skill enhancement courses in early 2013. The CIC will also examine the feasibility of outsourcing other courses. In addition, the CIC will provide subsidies for workers to attend trade tests or specified training courses. The third key area is to increase productivity of public works projects by enhancing the procurement strategy and formulating relevant guidelines. The last area is to make use of the CIC's JobsNet recruitment platform launched in 2011 and the Construction Industry Resource Center commissioned in 2012 to match manpower demand and supply. Looking ahead, we'll collaborate with the CIC industry stakeholders and construction workers to groom a multi-skilled workforce. Thank you. Mr. Lo Wai-kwok. This is a supplementary question, Mr. President. Graduates of the ECMTS we need to continue to receive training from the employers. Will the administration consider providing subsidies for graduates of the scheme to receive in-service training in order to enhance the new entrants' proficiencies in their skills and in return enhance safety? Please keep it to one question. If you have further questions, you can queue again. Secretary, when workers have attended courses and after they've graduated, they will continue to receive a subsidy. We'll closely liaison, keep in contact with the industries or the trades. In some trades, they ask for a longer subsidy period so that trainees will continue to receive the subsidy and at the same time receive in-service training. For bar benders, we have agreed to increase the training period from 97 days to 6 months. For other trades, if there is a need, and they can give us grants and data, and if this is supported, then we will consider their requests. Ms. Priscilla Leung. My grandfather and my great-grandfather were in the construction industry, so I fully understand the plight faced by the workers. The reason why you cannot attract new blood into the construction industry, in particular those doing manual work, is because they've been asking for a higher pay, and on top of that, there is a negative image of the industry. It gives the impression that you will have no future and you will only attract rough people. So you cannot attract new blood because they want to be respected. I've asked a similar question in a panel before. Can you provide more subsidy to train them up? Can you enhance their status by, say, for example, giving them a new title, say, to give them a title of landscape beautician or cityscape beautician, just like beauticians in salons, so that you can attract more new blood and so that the trade itself will command respect. Secretary. We've been actively liaising with the CIC and the industry. As I've said, there is the build-up campaign, a publicity campaign to disseminate the correct message about the construction industry. And recently, there are more and more young people joining the industry. Apart from improving the image, we need to give them training to enhance their skills so that they will become semi-skilled or skilled worker. And as a result, their pay will increase. At the same time, we need to improve their work condition to provide them with a safe working environment and a hygienic one. It is a fact that in the past 10 years, the safety of construction sites has greatly improved by 40%, and we will continue to work on improving the image of the industry. Mr. CHUNG Kwok-pan. Sorry, this speaker is not coming through. It's a near full employment. And there is a labor shortage in the construction industry, and as a result, you have to offer higher pay, and for some trades it offers over $1,000 or $2,000 a day. And as a result, it has poached other workers from other trades. Will the administration consider that, like what they did in 1990s, in the construction of the Chalakok Airport, import foreign workers to work in the construction site so that to alleviate the manpower shortage in Hong Kong? Secretary, at the moment we have no such plan because the unemployment rate of the construction industry is about 4.4%, whereas underemployment rate is 7.1%. At the time when the airport was constructed, the unemployment rate was only 2.2%. It shows that there is room to provide more training for local construction workers to improve employment, to improve the employment. With more and more major infrastructure projects in the pipeline, construction workers will benefit. Then they will see their pay being raised. And in relation to individual trades, this is our view. We give priority of employment to local workers. If for individual trades and there is insufficient number of workers or we don't have adequate skilled workers, the Labor Department, through the supplementary labor scheme, import foreign workers. Last year, we have imported about 200 workers for specific trades that can, of which the posts cannot be filled by local workers. And still, when such foreign workers are imported, we require those involved to train local workers to ensure that local workers will get a good employment opportunity. Mr. Jeffrey Lam, what we see is a labor shortage of 15% in the construction industry. I'm very concerned that in the coming few years, with more infrastructural projects being implemented, well, as the administration recently said that there will be more land being made available for construction. We will need construction workers as well as supervisors, foremen, etc. If there is not enough workers, I am worried that it may dampen the progress of the housing construction of the administration, and I'm also concerned about the quality of the housing units built. And without an adequate manpower workforce, the quality might be affected, and purchasers will suffer. What is your question? You say there is a scheme to train those who would like to join the industry, but it will take time. Would you please ask your question? Previously, I have touched on import of foreign workers, and the Secretary said there is no such plan. I think you should be more forward-looking. At the moment, we have a shortage. When you need more workers, the situation may be more acute. You have spent more than a minute and a half. Please go to your question. Secretary, have you spoken to other policy bureau on addressing the manpower shortage problem, say, for example, through importing of foreign workers? Secretary, as I've mentioned, that in the industry, the unemployment rate is 4.4% and underemployment rate is 7.1%. In the coming few years, we foresee a blooming construction industry. We will closely monitor the manpower demand in this industry. As I said in my main reply, the CIC will engage a consultant to conduct a study on manpower supply and demand, and we conduct similar surveys from time to time. Under the Labor Department, there is already the supplementary labor import scheme, and contractors in need can make applications under this scheme. We have stepped up our effort in training workforce and stepped up our efforts to attract new youngsters, new arrivals, and ethnic minorities to join the industry. We are of the view that by providing more training opportunities, it will enhance the employment opportunities for local workers. The underemployment rate of 7.1% in the industry is deemed high. So through our training, the various training schemes, if we can enhance their skills, say for example to train a barbender to become a farm workers, then there will be more job opportunities for the workers. And to a certain extent, it will alleviate the manpower shortage in individual trades. We'll adopt a multi-pronged approach and put the priority on the livelihood of local workers. Mr. Lam, I asked the Secretary to be more forward-looking. If there is a manpower shortage, has he spoken to other policy bureau on importing foreign workers? Sorry, Mr. Lam, you have spent a lot of time on your question, and I think the Secretary has already answered your question. You can follow it up on other occasions. Mr. Kwok-pan. Well, I wonder if the administration has just blindly the Secretary said that Mr. Lo has blindly adopted the survey of the relevant associations and said that there is a 15% manpower shortage. What I would like to hear more from this Secretary that about the training schemes that they have in place. They said that in the past, they have trained 2,000 people, and in the coming future, every year they'll be able to train 2,000 people. Most of the training courses are full-time. If these workers will have to give up their daily pay to attend such courses, it is an impossible task. So can you provide more part-time courses or evening courses instead of full-time courses in order to enhance the competitiveness of the workers? I think legislators need training. Well, just like the workers, as to how to just strike how to be more swift and speedy in doing their work. Secretary, there are different considerations for different trades. Say, for example, for basic or ordinary skills, they will require full-time training. And we have various schemes, say for example the contractor cooperative training scheme. They will hire the trainees and then give them training. So they will receive a short training course in the institute, and then they will start work and receive on-the-job training. And I think there is quite a bit of room for improvement in relation to trade tests, and we will go and think on it as to what other areas we need to improve. We've spent over 20 minutes on this question.
Question number 5, Mr. YIU Si-wing. President, some members of the tourism industry have indicated that as the government resumed 3 coach parking sites within the Kai-Tak development area in September 2012, which involved nearly 1,000 large coach parking spaces and 2,000 medium coach parking spaces, the number of parking spaces for coaches in urban areas has decreased substantially. As such, some drivers are forced to park their coaches in car parks in remote areas in the NT, which has led to increased fuel expenditure. The parking and retrieval of coaches in NT by drivers are very time-consuming and take up their rest time, and may even cause traffic accidents as coach drivers are tired. In this connection, the government informed its Council A of the number of large coaches in Hong Kong, the respective numbers of large coach parking spaces for nighttime, daily, and mainly a monthly rental in urban areas, and whether it knows the average rents of daily and monthly parking spaces and the average rent increases per year in the past 3 years. B, of the expected rate of change in the number of coach parking spaces in urban areas in coming 3 years. If such number were decrease, of the remedial measures to be taken, whether the authorities have drawn up any long-term planning for coach parking spaces, if they have, of the details. If not, why not? And C, with the commissioning of the first berth of the Kai-Tak cruise terminal in the middle of this year, thousands of tourists will disembark at the same time in the future. Whether the authorities will provide sufficient large coach parking spaces at the terminal, whether these are temporary parking spaces, if so, whether they will be converted into long-term parking spaces. Secretary for Transport and Housing. President, the government monitors and regularly reviews the supply and demand of coach parking spaces in various districts of Hong Kong and will take appropriate measures when necessary to meet demand. Coach is a type of non-franchised bus, and it can use all parking spaces designated for non-franchised buses. If there is relatively high demand for parking spaces in individual districts, we will implement the following basket of measures to increase the number of parking spaces. Providing on-street parking spaces without compromising road safety and affecting other road users. Allocating land not planned for immediate development for use as temporary car parks. If the demand for parking spaces designated for non-franchised buses is particularly high for a certain district, such as popular tourist spots, we will consider designating some existing temporary car parks for the exclusive use of non-franchised buses when renewing the tenancy of car parks, and requiring an appropriate number of parking spaces designated for non-franchised buses to be included in the new developments where appropriate. For example, the Ocean Park has recently provided 100 parking spaces designated for non-franchised buses for coach parking in its extension works. Space for 30 parking spaces designated for non-franchised buses has been reserved in the redevelopment project of the former North Point estate to meet the long-term demand. Due to the need to provide sufficient works areas for the Sha-Tin to Central Link project, the tenancy of 3 temporary car parks in Kai-Tak development area had to be terminated in the period between September and November 2012, and the area of 2 temporary car parks in the KTDA area had to be reduced. As a result, the number of parking spaces designated for non-franchised buses in these 5 temporary car parks located east of the Olympic Avenue decreased by 475 from 680 to 205. In response, the government reserved 2 sites which are in close proximity, measuring for 40,000 square meters as temporary car parks. Opened in October 2012, these 2 car parks provide 342 parking spaces for non-franchised buses. The Transport Department estimates that the 547 parking spaces designated for non-franchised buses currently provided by the 4 temporary car parks in the KTDA, together with the space on the spare parking spaces designated for non-franchised buses in the neighboring areas of Kowloon City and Kowloon Bay, could genuinely meet the parking demand of the affected non-franchised buses, including coaches. My reply to the various parts of Hon YIU Si-wing's question is as follows. A. In the past 3 years, the total number of non-franchised buses in Hong Kong, including coaches, school buses, and residence services buses, remained at about 6,700. Currently, the number of parking spaces for non-franchised buses is about 5,300, including some 1,000 on-street parking spaces, some 1,600 parking spaces in various temporary car parks located in the Eastern District, Kowloon District, Wong Tai Sin, Kwun Tong, Sai Kung, and Kwai Ching, and some 2,700 parking spaces at residential, commercial, school, and other government sites. Although the number of non-franchised buses parking spaces is smaller than the number of non-franchised buses, some non-franchised buses would be parked at non-designated parking spaces in housing estates, schools, and commercial buildings such as hotels. If there is a clear shortage of parking spaces for non-franchised buses in individual districts, the government will increase the number through the above-mentioned short-term and long-term measures to meet the demand as far as possible. The total number of parking spaces for coaches in urban areas is about 2,900.
the TD does not have a breakdown of the number of parking spaces by rental pattern. According to the TD survey conducted in 2010, on charges for parking spaces for non-franchise buses in temporary car parks, in general, the hourly parking fee was about $5 to $20. Daily parking fee, excluding nighttime, about $20 to $100. Nighttime parking fee, about $30 to $100. And monthly parking fee, about $2,000 to $3,000. TD has not conducted similar surveys in the past 2 years and therefore does not have statistics on the increase of parking fee. B. The number of parking spaces for non-franchise buses in urban areas is affected by various factors. One of the more important factors is determination of temporary car parks that provide parking spaces designated for non-franchise buses by the Lands Department for major infrastructure projects or permanent land development. We will continue to monitor the supply of parking spaces for non-franchise buses in various districts and will take measures to increase supply where necessary. C. The operator of the Kai Tak Cruise Terminal is responsible for the operation and management of the ground transportation area, including all driveways and parking spaces within the terminal. There are a total of 40 pick-up and drop-off spaces and 30 queuing spaces for coaches transporting passengers to and from the terminal. Such spaces are permanent facilities within the terminal. According to the assessment of the project consultant, assuming that each coach has a capacity of 45, the 40 pick-up and drop-off spaces would be able to handle 1,800 passengers simultaneously. When a cruise vessel berths at the terminal, the cruise operator will typically make arrangements for passengers to disembark in groups. To ensure that cruise passengers will disembark in an orderly manner, the terminal operator will, together with the cruise operator and tour operator, work out in advance the necessary arrangements according to the passenger volume and berthing duration. Therefore, the number of such spaces should be adequate to meet the operational needs of the largest cruise liners. Mr. YIU Si-wing. President, the tourism industry has been developing pretty quickly in recent years, a double-digit growth, but according to the government statistics in urban areas, the spaces are not sufficient. Many are on a temporary basis. My question for the administration is this. The government is resuming the development of HOS and rental and increasing the rental housing production. In West Kowloon, will the government progressively increase the number of parking spaces for coaches? Secretary, President, in 1990, in the white paper on the transport policy, the government has designated the policy that we have been following, and that is we're encouraging the private developers to provide the parking spaces, and the government doesn't build any multi-story car parks. And we normally would resort to temporary car parks or on-street parking facilities. As I said at the present moment, regarding non-franchised buses, our assessment is that the spaces are still adequate. There may be the number of spaces may be smaller than the number of coaches, but some are parked within private premises. But we will monitor the situation in various districts. We noticed that in certain districts there may be vacancies. For areas where they are busy, there is a keen demand for the spaces, but we will make a suitable arrangement depending on the situation. Mr. Frankie Yik. President, thank you. The Secretary said a moment ago that over the past 20 years there were only 2 studies conducted on the demand in this regard. The last one was conducted in 2000, which was completed in 2002. I mean, it's been about 10 years now. Over the years, the economy has been developing. The population has gone up. The tourists have also increased in number. So has the number of vehicles. The inadequacy of parking spaces is getting serious, not just for coaches, but also for school buses, articulated vehicles and so on. I've received complaints in this regard. Now, many of these vehicles would have to be parked in remote areas at the risk of being prosecuted. Today, in his principal reply, the Secretary told us about the 100 parking spaces from the Ocean Park and the 30 parking spaces in North Point Estate. All the rest of them are temporary measures. Now, Mr. Secretary, in your reply, you said that in East Kowloon, you're going to do something about the situation, but the East Kowloon development is coming along. In East Kowloon, in Kai Tak, all these parking spaces will be done away with. So where do you think these vehicles would have to be parked? My question is, will the government conduct a study on the demand for parking spaces afresh and come up with a plan for this purpose, and how soon will this be done? How long is it going to take? If not, why not? Secretary, well, indeed, the survey on parking demand was conducted about 10 years ago, and I feel that it is time for the government departments to conduct a similar survey. But statistically, over the past couple of years, if you look at the rate of growth for various vehicles, now for non-franchised buses, the rate of increase is stable. Now, private vehicles and private minibuses have increased on a bigger scale than others. Over the years, we have been relying on temporary parking spaces, but as members said, we have to optimize the limited supply of land for infrastructural and housing development, and therefore we have to look at it in a comprehensive manner as regards the demand for parking spaces. But the situation is not really all that bad from our assessment, because there are vacancies in some temporary car parks, but there are challenges in some busy areas. Mr. James Tin. President, in relation to Mr. Yu's question, the Tourism Board is in support of that. The three major car parks, Kai Tak, the problems lie with the fact that there is nighttime parking demand. Now, when the tourists are being buzzed around all over Hong Kong, there is a lack of parking space. Now, we have 38 million visitors coming from the mainland, and they are causing a lot of friction in Hong Kong to the detriment of our economic development. Other than the large-scale car parks, now when they have set down the tourists, there is a lack of space for them to park their vehicles while waiting for the tourists to get back on the coaches. So would there be any on-street roadside parking spaces available for these vehicles? Secretary? I go along with what Mr. James Tin said, in that we do need to meet different needs in terms of land supply, and tourism is an important aspect in Hong Kong. As I said in my previous replies, in some districts we don't experience any problems with parking. There are vacancies, but in other areas things are more hectic. It's not simply a question of overnight parking. During daytime, when the tourists getting on and off the coaches, there may be problems. Now, we've visited some of these areas, and the problems are particularly acute. So it is important for us to increase the parking spaces in these areas. We have liaised with various departments over the past 2 years in Tsim Sha Tsui. There have been 9 roadside and non-franchised buses parking spaces. Now, this may not be able to keep up with the increase in the number of tourists, but through the Tourism Commission, we hope that in the new tourist developments, we will make sure that there will be sufficient parking for the coaches. Mr. Chen Kam-lam, President, in the tourist areas, the points, lack of spaces for the coaches to pick up and set down passengers. The problem is particularly serious in Tsim Sha Tsui, Wan Chai, and other areas. We found that there can be a backlog of coaches that have to queue a long time for picking up and setting down passengers. And nighttime parking is also a problem. And in quiet streets, there is the chock-a-block full of these vehicles being parked there. And the situation is undesirable. Now, for the Kai Tak cruise terminal, which is going to be opened next year, there will be a situation where roads in Guntong may be taken up by the coaches, and they'll be causing traffic congestion. And if there is a lack of drop-off points, will the Secretary consider identifying more parking spaces or drop-off points for these vehicles? Secretary, by the middle part of this year, the cruise terminal will be commissioned, and we have taken a whole series of preparatory measures. As I said, as I mentioned, there are pick-up and drop-off spaces being designated. And in terms of connectivity, we do provide a minibus route for the passengers. Now, Mr. Chen Kam-lam is more concerned about the sheer number of tourists, and there may be a high number of coaches parked on the roadside. Now, we will have a look at the actual situation upon commissioning of the Kai Tak cruise terminal. And we have indeed put in place some traffic management measures to make sure that traffic flows smoothly. But if there is a congregation of tourists causing other problems, we will take corresponding measures. Mr. Ng Leung Sing, President, thank you. In Para B, if I may put a question here, when the Lands Department resumes the land for infrastructural development and cancels all these car parking spaces, would there be any consultation? Will there be any consultation in future should this happen? Secretary, for the temporary car parks, the leases are on a short-term basis, and perhaps it would take 6 months for the leases to be cancelled. Now, I hope that the relevant departments would have a clear idea as to whether the lease, the site where the leases are would be used in the short term, and that would make it easier for us to make a necessary arrangement for the parking spaces. We have increased our liaison in this regard.
Last oral question. Mr. Chung Kwok-pan. Thank you, President. In reply to my question raised in this Council earlier, the Chief Executive promised to examine how to build a good Hong Kong brand. In addition, he has promised in his election manifesto that we will support Hong Kong manufacturers in restructuring their business model to tap the domestic market on the mainland, especially in areas such as garment, toys, jewelry, electronics, watches and clocks, where our manufacturers has traditionally excelled in terms of branding, design, product research and development, market research, sales, marketing and exhibitions. We will strive to set up permanent exhibition venues in major mainland cities to display Hong Kong-made products. In this connection, will the government inform this Council A whether the government has any initial ideas for helping local small and medium enterprises, especially those from the manufacturing industries, in building brand Hong Kong? If it has, all the details and when it will put forward specific plans, if not the reasons for that. B, whether the government will complementarily will complementarily promote the development of Hong Kong industries while building brand Hong Kong, including the implementation of measures to encourage exchange and collaboration between Hong Kong manufacturers and overseas enterprises in tapping business opportunities, if it will, of the specific measures and the industries in which such measures will first be implemented, if not the reasons for that, whether the authorities will allocate additional resources to assist Hong Kong manufacturers in developing the domestic market on the mainland, taking the opportunities of the preferential policies under the mainland and Hong Kong closer economic partnership manufacturers in developing the domestic market on the mainland, taking the preferential policies under CEPA and through the quality products under brand Hong Kong, as well as to assist Hong Kong manufacturers in developing overseas markets, if they will, of the details, if not the reasons for that. And C, given that in recent years quite a number of manufacturers in the clothing industry intend to relocate their factories on the mainland or in Southeast Asia back to Hong Kong, of the policies that the authorities have put in place to help such manufacturers moving back to Hong Kong and to strengthen the brand prestige of good quality of made in Hong Kong products, of policies for encouraging Hong Kong manufacturers to develop new materials of clothing and new technology for production, encouraging them to collaborate with universities and scientific research institutions, etc., in order to build and develop Hong Kong brand. President, my consolidated reply to the members' questions is as follows. To help the enterprises enhance their competitiveness and expand their business, the government has implemented various measures to assist different industries, including those industries which have traditionally excelled, like garment, toys, jewelry, electronics, watches and clocks, in developing brands, upgrading and restructuring their operations, exploring sales channels, and enhancing product research and development, and has also been providing the latest market information to them. On funding support to assist Hong Kong enterprises in capturing the opportunities arising from policies of expanding domestic demand and encouraging upgrading and restructuring in the National 12th Five-Year Plan, we launched a dedicated fund of $1 billion in end of June 2012 to provide funding support for individual enterprises and non-profit distributing organizations to assist the enterprises in developing brands, upgrading and restructuring operations, and promoting domestic sales in the market so as to enhance their competitiveness and further their business development in the mainland. The response of the trade has been overwhelming. Under the Enterprise Support Program, 297 applications received under the first two batches had been processed, of which 31 applications were approved with an average funding amount of $368,000. Another 71 applications were approved with conditions under the Organization Support Program. 37 applications received under the first two batches had been processed, of which 17 applications were approved with an average funding amount of around $3.57 million. We are now processing the third batch of applications, including 222 applications submitted by enterprises and 17 applications submitted by organizations. The SME Development Fund, or the SDF, administered by the TID, the Trade and Industry Development, also provides funding support to trade and industry organizations, etc., to implement projects which help SMEs develop and promote their brands so as to tap into the mainland and overseas markets. In the past 3 years, over $14 million of funding has been granted under the SDF to support a number of projects relating to development and promotion of brands. In addition, the SME Export Marketing Fund, or the EMF, operated by the TID, supports individual SMEs to participate in export promotion activities with a cumulative funding support for each SME at $150,000. About $2.27 billion of funding has been granted under the EMF, benefiting over 36,000 enterprises. The Hong Kong Export Credit Insurance Corporation, ECIC, also implements various measures to support Hong Kong exporters, in particular SMEs, to engage in export trade and export markets. These include providing special premium discounts for exports to emerging markets under specified conditions. On the other hand, the government and other relevant organizations also organize a wide range of activities to promote Hong Kong brands. For example, the Hong Kong Trade Development Council organizes exhibitions and short-term promotional activities in the mainland and overseas markets to promote Hong Kong brands and provide business marketing, matching services, etc., in order to support and encourage Hong Kong enterprises to exchange and cooperate with mainland and overseas enterprises to test the markets and expand their business network. These activities include the lifestyle expos organized in emerging markets and the style Hong Kong shows held in major cities in the mainland, etc. The TDC also set up a design gallery in Beijing and Guangzhou to provide long-term sales platform for Hong Kong brands so as to test the market and build up brand awareness. As e-commerce has been increasingly popular, the TDC has also set up a design gallery of websites on Taotao's Tmall, helping Hong Kong brands explore the vast opportunities in mainland online shopping market. In addition, our offices in the mainland collaborate with trade associations and other organizations to organize Hong Kong Week promotional events in the mainland in 2012 and 13. 2014 in order to promote Hong Kong products and services with a view to assisting Hong Kong enterprises in building up their brand image and exploring the domestic market. Apart from funding support and promotional activities, we also provide enterprises with various information and services to enhance their ability in developing brands and exploring sales channels. For example, DID has been co-organizing a high-level conference on brand development with the TDC and providing useful information on branding through its website. Moreover, the HKTDC Research Electronic Information Platform also provides different types of market information, including analysis of consumers' needs and preferences, in order to assist Hong Kong enterprises in understanding the latest situation of the mainland and overseas markets. Regarding technology and research development of the textiles and clothing industry, there are various programs under the Innovation and Technology Fund, or the ITF, to support and encourage Hong Kong enterprises to conduct research and development work in order to enhance the competitiveness of their products. These include the Small Entrepreneurial Research Assistance Program and the University Industry Collaboration Program, etc. To further encourage private companies to conduct R&D work, the government launched the $200 million R&D cash rebate scheme in April 2010. To encourage the effectiveness of the scheme, we have increased the level of cash rebate by threefold, from 10% to 30%, with effect from the 1st of February 2012. In addition, the government has set up 5 R&D centers since 2006 to promote and coordinate partnership between university and the industry to conduct applied R&D in selected technology areas, which include the Hong Kong Research Institute of Textiles and Apparel. Up to the end of November 2012, the HKRITA has conducted 80 R&D projects funded by the ITF with total funding of about $215 million. With an increasing number of projects completed, Hong Kong RITA has also been encouraging actively in the transfer of its R&D results to the industry and commercialization of the R&D outcomes in recent years. Mr. Chung also mentioned about the relocation of factories of the clothing industry back to Hong Kong. In fact, this issue does not only involve a single industry but concerns the long-term development of industries in Hong Kong. In this regard, the Chief Executive has already stated clearly in his policy platform that we would draw up an overall industrial policy. On this, the Economic Development Commission, or the EDC, to be established under the CE's direction, will look into the support policies and measures required by industries that could foster Hong Kong's further economic development. The EDC will be led by the CE. The preparatory work for the establishment has commenced and is envisaged that the EDC will be set up shortly. Thank you. Mr. Chung? Thank you. In a main reply by the Secretary, basically he was just reiterating old policies, and most of them are actually introduced by the former government. So my question for the Secretary is that at the question and answer session last time, the Chief Executive, who also promised in his political manifesto that he would be doing more in terms of branding Hong Kong. So I'd like to know what the existing term of government is going to do instead of about existing policies or policies introduced by the former government. Secretary? Thank you, Mr. Chung, for your question. The long-standing government policy is that at different levels and perspectives, we will provide support for the industries, including individual industries mentioned by Mr. Chung in his question. And in terms of such support for the industries, in developing market or in promoting and opening up market through the cooperation of chambers of commerce and also different organizations like the TDC, and also the Productivity Council, they would also be able to help the industries to develop these markets. And other than market promotion, in terms of fundraising, under the different schemes, we would also provide opportunities for these business sectors to raise funds. And also, after the sale of products, in terms of credit insurance, well, there are also a series of measures to offer preferential treatment to these sectors. And also in design, in terms of moving towards high value addedness, well, in the design of products, in terms of services and products, we will also help the industries move towards high value addedness. And of course, we also have CEPA, as you know. So we work closely with the mainland, and as a result, many opportunities have been developed for the sectors and industries so that they will be able to tap the opportunities and go into the mainland market. So there have been a series of measures at different times. They've been introduced and launched recently in 2012 in June with regard to the dedicated fund. Well, that's because of the new policy introduced by our country, so they will also be able to develop the domestic markets, and as a result of that, our measures have also been very welcomed by the sectors. So the administration will be looking at the different needs at different times, and when necessary, we will talk to the industries, and when necessary, we can provide more support to them. Mr. James Tien. Thank you, President. Before I came in, I was already expecting the reply from the administration. I think it's all the same, all right, in terms of funding support, promotion, information, and so on. So how can these help these industries? And if you want to promote the industries, you will have to have support measures and policies. For example, if you want to build the Hong Kong brand, then there are two things that are essential. Number one, intellectual property. And number two, the nurturing of talents on a continuous basis. All right, we do have our own brands, but then they have been registered on the mainland, and when you go into the mainland market, they would sue you for infringement. And also we have a degree offering certain training, but then after you have designed a clothing or garment, you will have to give them the spec. You will have to have a technical personnel to do it. And then you will also have to have a tailor who is able to translate that into concrete design and cutting. But then after graduating from universities, many of these talents simply leave Hong Kong or go away. So how can you help them? So that where there are infringement litigation on the mainland, what kind of support would you be providing to these manufacturers? Will you be talking to the mainland with regard to their trademark policy so that they would be in line with, or they would be complying with the Paris Convention instead of just holding on to such trademarks for life? All right, you can only ask one supplementary question. Sorry, I forgot, so I'll just ask this. This is really very important. Yes, Bureau Director. Thank you, Mr. Tien, for his question. Well, Mr. Michael Tien said that we have a shortage of talents. I do not agree, because our tertiary institutions are of very high standards, and in response to market needs and academic needs, they can provide large pools of talents to our business sector, and they can always develop their potential in Hong Kong, and therefore I do not agree that we have a shortage of talents. But then for the SMEs, of course, well, when they try to start up new businesses, they are facing a lot of difficulties. That's why, as I said, in my response to Mr. Chung's questions, I already set out the initiatives introduced by the administration to help the SMEs in their operation and in starting up new businesses. And of course, there are other examples. For example, the TID has an inquiry center. But then he's asking about protection of intellectual property on the mainland. I think Mr. Michael Tien raised two questions. Number one is intellectual property, and number two is about nurturing of talents. That's why I was trying to answer his question on the nurturing of talents. I'd just like to say that other than the universities and tertiary institutions, in fact, the TDC and the business sector and also the TID have been offering a number of programs to help the sector to start up businesses and operate and maintain their operation. In terms of intellectual property, I would look at it more positively. That is, Hong Kong has a very good regime of intellectual property protection. And in terms of our enforcement, we are very serious about that. And in fact, that would also provide a lot of opportunities for these enterprises to develop their intellectual property products. Precisely because we are very serious about that, and we also have a very conducive environment. And on the mainland, there might have been intellectual property disputes, and I'm sure Mr. Michael Tien knows that very well. Well, in this regard, we will liaise with the relevant authorities on the mainland so that we can work together to combat on such infringement acts. And as Mr. Michael Tien just said, intellectual property, in fact, Hong Kong's development opportunities are very broad. And you might also be aware, because of the unique circumstances in Hong Kong, we have a lot of support measures, financial and others. So there is a lot of potential for intellectual property to develop in Hong Kong in terms of IP management and also IP trade. I think Hong Kong does have a lot of room for development. But then he has not given us the specific details as to how we can protect Hong Kong manufacturers in the mainland. They have been sued for infringement. Well, if you have the specific details of specific cases, do let us know so we can track those cases to see what we can do. But basically, we're responsible for Hong Kong's jurisdiction, and we can only be responsible for whatever happens in Hong Kong. But then if you want us to offer assistance on the mainland, we'll be more than happy to help. Mr. Frankie Yik. Well, just now the Bureau Director said that through the TDC and TID, Hong Kong manufacturers would be assisted in developing their business on the mainland. I remember the Chief Executive, Mr. C.Y. Leung, in his manifesto indicated that he would consider upgrading our economic and trade offices on the mainland in order to assist Hong Kong businessmen in the mainland. And he also said that he might also consider upgrading the ETOs on the mainland in order to help upgrade Hong Kong's businesses and industries development on the mainland. So I'd like to know the progress so far, and do you have any specific plans and measures in place in order to help Hong Kong businessmen to further develop their businesses on the mainland? Bureau Director. Thank you, Mr. Yik, for your question. In fact, our ETOs on the mainland have already obtained a lot of benefits and rights for our businessmen. For example, they have approached their counterparts on the mainland to reflect the concerns of Hong Kong businessmen, and also through some briefing sessions and seminars, they have also relayed the concerns of the mainland authorities to our businessmen so that they would know the latest developments on the mainland. They've also talked to different chambers of commerce by organizing trade fairs and promotional activities to help Hong Kong businessmen to develop more business opportunities on the mainland. And of course, coming up, in response to the needs of the business sector and the actual situations on the ground, well, in terms of upgrading their status and furthering their efforts, we will see what we can do to meet the needs of the market. Mr. Yik, your question has not been answered. I'd just like to clarify. Mr. Yik, can you repeat the part of your question that has not been answered? Yes, President. Just now I was asking the Bureau Director as to whether there would be a specific plan that would be implemented on upgrading the ETOs on the mainland. President, the policy of the government is that whenever a policy is mature, it will be launched, and therefore in due course and at appropriate time we will talk to the sector and we will make the announcement. Dr. Lo Wai-kwok. President, in order to encourage local brands to develop and the R&D work, I'd like to know if the administration would consider this. Just now, the Bureau Director talked about a number of support programs, but then would they consider providing funding support for patent applications by local businessmen and also help them in doing design registration? So will you be providing funding support to these, because that would also help protect their intellectual property? Bureau Director, I'm sure the member is aware of this. That is, in terms of patent registration, we have already put in place measures to provide funding support to our budding businessmen in registering such patents. So if he thinks that's not adequate, please let us know. Well, for patent registration and design, it's not just about enterprises. Individuals can also apply for such registration. I'd like to know if individuals would also be eligible, because just now I was referring to both enterprises and individuals. Well, President, I understand that it's not just confined to enterprises. I think individuals can also apply for registration. But then, as I'm not sure, I'll provide a written reply after the meeting. Mr. Ng Leung Sing. Thank you, President. I'd just like to ask about the $1 billion dedicated fund. In the initial design, have you got any targets as to how many brands will be established and from which sectors will they belong to? From which sectors are they? Well, for the 11 dedicated fund, well, we have not designated a number of sectors that will benefit from that, and of course, the more the better. And therefore, since the launching of this scheme, the response has been very enthusiastic, and therefore, in due course, we will review the effectiveness of the program, including the number of applications, the nature of the projects that have been successful, and to what extent has it helped these industries and sectors. That's because under the National 12-5-year plan, we have also put in place this policy of building Hong Kong brand, and that has been launched in response to the request by the sector, and the sectors have already indicated their support for this, and of course we will review it, and when necessary we will make adjustments. Ms. Elizabeth Quat, I think the purpose is to help the SMEs, and therefore the administration must set a good example in order to provide more room for these SMEs to develop. But then I've also received some complaints when they get orders from overseas. Well, very often the government would say that has the government used your products, and if they have not used that, then is it because the quality is problematic? That's why the Hong Kong government's tendering arrangement has not helped these SMEs at all. And the SMEs often say that you will have to abide by the WTO relevant requirements, and therefore SMEs do not have any advantage. But then for many other countries, they are advanced economies that have also acceded to the WTO. The government can also give preferential treatment to local SMEs. So have you learned from their experience, so that while we comply with the WTO's requirement, local SMEs can also benefit from the procurement process of the government? And when will these measures be implemented in order to help these SMEs build their brands and also develop overseas and the mainland markets? Bureau Director, I'm grateful to Ms. Quat for her question. Well, when it comes to government procurement, we will have to have competition on a fair, transparent, on a fair and transparent basis. We will also have to be accountable to the public, and therefore such tendering arrangements will have to be proceeded on that basis. And therefore both services and products will have to meet our requirement, and they will also have to be in public interest. And such procurement principles would also be in line with the WTO's procurement treaty. So that is basically to create a fair or level playing field for all, so that there would not be any discrimination against any individual bidder. But then there is sufficient flexibility to allow the relevant policy bureau, so that where circumstances permit and without violating the relevant procurement principles, then we can also make appropriate adjustments to our tendering arrangements. I've already reminded the relevant policy bureaus and so on, when they prepare tendering specifications, there should not be too many restrictions that might affect the SMEs in joining the bids. And where possible, more information can be provided in order to reduce the requirement for making any deposit. They can also use bank guarantee to replace the vetting process. That would also reduce the burden on the part of the SMEs, so that they would find it easier to take part in such procurement activities. I've also noticed that Ms. Quat also talked about implementing trial schemes to test use such products. Well, in fact, we have also tried out different technologies. So, for example, within the hospital authority, well, in a form of, instead of resorting to procurement, we might implement pilot projects, so that organizations would also be able to understand the requirements, and their products can also be test used so that when they go to overseas and take part in some tendering exercises, then they could at least come up with some track record of their products being used in Hong Kong, and that would also help them. So that has been done, and the innovation and technology development does have a very positive role in this regard. Sorry, Ms. Kwok. We have already exceeded the time given for any particular question. That's why I cannot allow you to ask any further questions.
Bills, first reading. Stamp Duty Amendment Bill 2012.